I am honoured to be part of today's event. As I have said before, the Consulate of Ireland is delighted to be part of the Black, Brown and Green Voices series. It is fundamentally important work that goes to the heart of what Ireland is today, what America is today, and ultimately what Irish America is today. Much of the focus of this work has been on uncovering and celebrating the ties of heritage, those who are at once African American and Irish American. The launch of the African American Irish Diaspora Network a year ago has given enormous impetus to this work, despite the challenges of the pandemic. However, today is about a different track in African American Irish connections. It is those connections that were built because of concern on one side of the Atlantic about what was happening on the other side at different times in our history. 175 years ago this month, Frederick Douglass was in Ireland, where he was taken aback in the best possible way by the warm welcome he received there. That anniversary is being celebrated even as we sit here today. A lecture by the wonderful Brian Stevenson recently in Ivy House, virtually in Ivy House, was one of the highlights of those celebrations. Last year, the world lost two giants of civil rights in John Lewis and John Hume. John Hume made no secret of the influence that the civil rights movement here in the United States had on his work in Northern Ireland. And that brings us to the Reverend Herbert Daughtry. Reverend Daughtry, thank you for joining us here today. Reverend, thank you for the interest you showed in Ireland 40 years ago, when it was a difficult time in Northern Ireland. The island of Ireland is a better place than that. It is a better place now. It is a better place because of peace. And that peace was brought about with US help. That US help was essential to bringing peace to Northern Ireland. It is also a better place because of increased diversity. It is a much changed place from the Ireland in which I grew up. When we get beyond this pandemic, maybe we can welcome you back to Ireland and show you this new changed Ireland. In the meantime, I look forward to hearing from you today. Reverend Daughtry, thank you.
Okay, Reverend, are you good if I start speaking now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's great. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Miriam Nyhan Gray, the Associate Director and Director of Graduate Studies at New York University's Centre for Irish and Irish American Studies, Glucksman, Ireland House. 2 years ago, with the support of the Consulate of Ireland for New York, we initiated a documentation strategy for the Archives of Irish America to capture the diversity of the Irish diaspora. This project is entitled Black, Brown and Green Voices. It has been hugely rewarding work, collecting oral histories and building a sense of community with people who have not in the past been too engaged in Irish spaces. When the pandemic came upon us in the spring of 2020, we sought ways to reach a wider audience. And in that vein, we launched a series of public online lectures, all aimed at excavating the interconnectedness of peoples of Irish and of African descent. We've been fortunate to partner with some stellar organizations in bringing these talks to a wide audience, such as NYPL's Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, the African American Irish Diaspora Network, and our colleagues at NYU DC Dialogues. The seeds of today's event were planted in a one sentence or two sentences in the book that the last speaker in this series, Brian Dooley, mentioned. Early on in Brian's book entitled The Black and Green, The Fight for Civil Rights in Northern Ireland and Black America, he referenced a film called The Black and the Green, made by Sinclair Bourne. That one line culminated in some research and communications that have been fruitful. I don't want to linger too long, as our speaker today is someone of immense standing, but I do feel like I need to set the scene a little bit. Reverend Daughtry, with whom I will speak, was part of a delegation of African American civil rights activists who traveled to Northern Ireland not that long after the end of the 1980-81 hunger strikes, which many remember as a really fraught time in Irish history, and a time which made Ireland feature regularly in world newspaper headlines. Sadly, the filmmaker St. Clair Bourne, one of the most prominent Black filmmakers of the late 20th century, is no longer amongst us, but Reverend Daughtry is, and what an honor it is to have him here today to reflect on that trip of almost 40 years ago. I must say that for the many people who have not had the opportunity to see the Black and the Green film, like myself, it is currently being restored. And I have been in touch secondhand with the custodians of St. Clair Bourne's archive, Miss Judith Bourne. We hope to be able to screen the Black and the Green next fall with the assistance of Jacob Perlin, who is helping us with, in general with the restoration project of this important film. So, to today's speaker, Reverend Herbert Daughtry is the National Presiding Minister Emeritus of the House of the Lord Churches, where he served from 1959 to 2019. Reverend Daughtry hails from a family that has produced 5 generations of Black church leaders. Currently National Presiding Minister of the House of the Lord Churches, he has previously served as chairman of the National United Front, as well as founder and president of the African People's Christian Organization. More than 50 years of involvement in church and community service has earned him the title, the People's Pastor. Reverend Daughtry's long career of activism began with the civil rights struggles in the 1950s, working for the Brooklyn Corps and Operation Breadbasket, and continued in the fight for community control of schools in the late 1960s. He subsequently helped to found several organizations, including Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, Alonzo Daughtry Memorial Family Life Services, which serves the community through innovative programming such as Families of Victims Against Violence, and Alonzo Daughtry Memorial Daycare Center, which provides early education under the motto, nurturing and educating the leaders of tomorrow. He currently serves as the chair of National Religious Leaders of African Ancestry concerned with Darfur. Reverend Daughtry has previously served as chair of the New York Citywide African American Clergy Council, African American Clergy and Elected Officials, and the Association of Brooklyn Clergy for Community Development, which built and renovated more than 500 units of housing for low and middle income families in Brooklyn. His commitment to global human rights and self-determination has led Reverend Daughtry to travel and lecture extensively around the world, and he has participated in dozens of international conferences and conventions, including speaking at United Nations subcommittees and meetings regarding South African apartheid, Cuba, the Middle East, and the state of the United States civil rights movement. After all that, Reverend Daughtry, thank you so much for being here today with me. It is such a pleasure to be here with you in this medium today, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule in the first instance to do this for us today.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Miriam. Thank you. I look forward to this opportunity to have this discussion. Just a couple of points on the introduction. You're right, I'm the Emeritus National Presiding Minister. Our daughter, my wife, Dr. Karen Smith Daughtry, we've been married 58 years. Our daughter is now the National Presiding Minister, which is the bishop of our churches. And we have 6 generations. Wow. And that our grandson is also a minister. And so just those 2 minor correction for the record.
For the record, but important. What an impressive family legacy, Reverend, and it must be so encouraging for you for the future to see your daughter and your grandson continuing in the tradition of the family. Your biography there finishes off. Oh, sorry, did you want to come in with
I was
something?
just saying, I should also add for the record, the daughter, the Reverend Leah Daughtry, which is now the bishop, in her own right, is a history maker in that she was the CEO of the 2008 Democratic Convention. And then Mrs. Clinton, Hillary Clinton, asked her to come back and do it again. In 2016, she was the CEO of the National Democratic Convention. First time it had ever happened. I thought that a bit of history might be interesting. And of course, it always gives me a chance to tell everybody, which I've told everybody for about 1 million times.
No, you're absolutely right. If their dad can't or grandfather can't advertise their accomplishments, who else can? So thank you for adding that to the biography. You need to update your website, Reverend, so it reflects all that information.
just made a note.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, just made a note to revise it. Yes.
So Reverend, there at the end of your biography, it sets the context a little bit with regard to the international reach and interest that you've had for many decades. Can you tell us, for the purposes of today, about how did you get connected with St. Clare-Bourne, and essentially, how did you end up in Northern Ireland in the 1980s? Can you tell us a little bit about how that actually happened?
Yes. Sinclair and I had a friendship prior to the trip. We had worked on various films, at least I'd been interviewed, in particular 9/11. We did a film on 9/11, at least she asked me to participate in the film. And he had been known in our communities as an excellent filmmaker. And so we had that kind of relationship prior to the island trip. And the interest of the trip came out of our association in the international struggles for liberation, for freedom, for justice. And toward that end, I met and we formed a coalition with Sandy Boyer. But I guess that speaks to the connection with Sandy Boyer, right? I mean, with Sinclair Boyer and with Sandy Boyer, which solidifies a coalition that we had been building. But the interest in the struggle in Ireland, Belfast, had attracted our interest prior to that, and that we've just been concerned about the connectedness of the human family. That in the poet John Donne, no man is an island. And I guess if you were writing today, say more a woman, no man or woman is an island. That's not for whom the bell's tolled. Certain that you know that poem. And because we believe in the oneness of the human family, therefore injustice everywhere, anywhere is injustice everywhere. And until freedom reigns for one part of the human family, no part is free. So toward that end, the struggle in Ireland caught our attention. But it was also a convergence of interest because Sandy and the Irish coalition supported South Africa. We put a lot of time, energy into the support of the struggle in Ireland and also and the struggle in Southern Africa, in particular South Africa.
So can I ask you, Reverend, did you, prior to this trip, I know you grew up in the South, originally in Georgia, if I remember correctly, and then came to Brooklyn as an adolescent, and have been in New York and Brooklyn for most of your life since. I'm wondering if you can recall, did you have very fixed assumptions about Ireland or about Irish America or about the Irish experience prior to you embarking on this mission? And were you aware of what was going on the ground in terms of the hunger strikes and everything that I think may have triggered the project in getting people like yourselves over? How aware were you of all that?
Well, in my earliest years in the South, of course, I was quite young. I came north when I was around 11 to 12. But even in the southern years, I seemed to have an unusual interest in what was happening in the world. And I used to love to read the newspapers. And when coming northward, it wasn't until I had a religious conversion, I believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, that this budding interest in international affairs grew to proportions that sharpened, heightened my interest with respect in particular to Belfast or Ireland. I became interested when in studying the history, I learned that Fred Douglass had taken up the cause. I did learn recently that he had even visited, thanks to you, he had even visited Belfast. I didn't know that before, that he'd even visited. But he was the earliest supporter, to my knowledge. But especially Devlin, Bernadette, came to the USA, and I think it was Chicago. She was given the medal, and she gave it to the Black Panther Party, and thus cemented the relationship in a way that had not been achieved before. So there was that interest in just international struggles normally. And then I can't recall how it happened, maybe because I was at a rally in support during the hunger strike. In fact, I was asked to do a memorial for Bobby Sands on the radio, to say a few words during the time of his death. And out of that came a closer relationship with Sandy Boyer, and through Sandy, met other leaders of the movement. They were very supportive of the Southern Africa struggle, in particular, South Africa. We had many marches together, many workshops, many rallies, and so eventually he asked me if I would like to take a trip to Ireland.
Reverend, when I was preparing to speak to you today and did a little bit of digging, it seems that, St. Clairbourne was influenced by some of the experiences that Paul Robeson had in Europe earlier on. Were you aware of those influences or that backdrop when you were interacting with him, or as you were aware of Frederick Douglass's maybe taking on the Irish struggle a little bit, but were you aware of the connection to Robeson?
No, I was not. Again, thanks to you. You've done your research well. Commend you. But Sinclair and I never talked about it, and I was not aware. Although not surprised, I was trying to delve deep into my memory bank, and because Paul Robeson is one of my heroes, really. I always admired his sacrifice and courage. So I might have known, but can't remember. But
Yeah, and it may well be, Reverend, that it's easy to speculate after the fact. Like, it may not have been something that St. Clair, talked about consciously, right? That it was an influence, like, we're all influenced by many things, right? But it's not always at the surface in terms of how we communicate that, right?
Right.
I wanted to ask you, Reverend, you were staying in the homes, I believe, of your hosts who were members of Sinn Féin. Have you any, I know it was a long time ago and you've traveled a lot and you've been in a lot of places, but do you remember anything about that experience of going and I mean, I guess that means by default that you were staying with families who I imagine, may not have been living in, I don't know how conditions compared with what you were familiar with in New York at the time, for example.
Right. Well, first I was surprised that when I was received at the airport, that I was taken to a private home. I had anticipated that I would be put up in a hotel, which is the usual way things are done. So I was surprised to be put up in this private home, and then learned that I think the husband is her name McAllister, if I remember, and the husband had been killed. And so in this home, which was a modest home, I was a bit surprised. But afterward, I cherished the memory that I actually was in the home of a person who had experienced in very painful ways the conflict, the war that was going on in Ireland at the time. I think looking back, it was a rare experience that I had, but it was not the most comfortable arrangement you could well imagine, not only with respect to the physical arrangement, but means sleeping in the home where people, the enemy had invaded with guns blazing. I must say that I usually pride myself on my ability to sleep anywhere, even on a rock, but I didn't get too much sleep that night. Or the period that I stayed there, I can't remember how many nights I stayed, but for the time, they did put me up in the hospital. They did put me up in the hotel, as St. Clair did. After I was there, he asked me to stay with him and do the interview. I don't want to get ahead of the sequence of your story, but he asked me to stay there and assist with the work that he was doing, and then I was put in the hotel. He put me up in the hotel. It was very comfortable, but again, I cherish the hospitality, not only from my host, but in Belfast, in Ireland, from the time that I was in the airport. I had never, and I've said this publicly, I've never been so hospitably treated anywhere in the world. I've landed in many airports, but never have I been treated so hospitably, so cordially as in the airport. They were late picking me up, and therefore I sat in the airport for a while. And everybody was just concerned about my well-being. And they were all constantly offering me food, drinks, whatever I wanted, and I couldn't pay for it. They refused to accept any money at all. And throughout my stay, I say over and over, said everywhere I go, every chance I get, and Ireland, Belfast, you know, switch up, I guess, depending upon your political persuasion. The hospitality was unforgettable. And but I wondered how it was, and I guess we'll get to that, that Irish generally, and particular police, I'm trying hard not to be monolithic in my statements. So Irish generally have not enjoyed the most cordial relationship in general. We've all had friends, you know, isolated here and there. And in particular, the police, generally speaking, have not enjoyed the most admirable reputation, to put it mildly. They've been very brutal, very vicious, and as you know better than I, probably the riots, and then I couldn't understand how in Ireland I encountered such hospitality, and in the USA there's just a dramatic difference, and it pointed up the U.S. Something's wrong in the USA, you know, that change people. I flew back from Ireland with a little young lad. He was going to visit his uncle in Staten Island. He was going to stay with his uncle in Staten Island, and hopefully he was going to become an American citizen. And he was just a nice young man, and we chatted all the way across the ocean. And I kept thinking, I wonder how he is going to be raised. I wonder if he would be differently when he become an adult, having been in the USA for a while.
Wow, Reverend, that's powerful. It touches on so many themes and topics and reflections that we need to make in terms of the American experience. It's truly remarkable. You know, I hope you're not saying what you're saying about the Irish hospitality because you feel you should say that to me. To hear you say, on the basis of the travel that you have done over time, to hear you say that the Irish hospitality that you experienced stands apart is really something that you've held that with you.
No, I'm very proud to say it, and say it everywhere. I think I recorded it in my book. You know, I think I recorded it in my book. But I have made that statement and will continue to make it for several reasons. Number one, to point up that people of Euro-ethnic background, white people, are not bad people all over the world, as some of people who have been so viciously treated have come to view the world. Second, it is an opportunity to try to forge a better understanding. Malcolm used to teach that travel broadens one's scope. And I have said, if I had the wherewithal, I would love to put people on ships, boats, and just let people travel around the world. And once we have done that, your mind broadens. Whatever you believe is expanded because we are so different and yet we're the same. And so the third reason in particular in the US, as I said, we have not enjoyed the most positive relationships, and especially with the police, especially with the police. And I've had occasion to speak to police academies. I've enjoyed generally good relationship with police. I've enjoyed the commissioners. Kelly has been a great friend, and in fact, exhibited the hospitality of Irish in Belfast who visited me in the hospital when I'd had serious operation. And so I've said to police, I've been bold. On the one side, I praised their hospitality around Belfast. And on the other side, I've been critical of New York, in particular police. How is it that some of you all can be so vicious? And I just left the country, and people are so hospitable. What happened to you all? You know, and so it's a great teaching opportunity. And may I say, I don't know how far along, but let me put it in this context. I came on the trip from GDR, German Democratic Republic. In fact, I guess that's another memorable experience. I was some of the last people to visit the country before it dissolved or was eradicated, however language you want to use, but it went out of existence. When I left the GDR, German Democratic Republic, I had to go through England, change planes, and there at the airport, the security person looked me over and tried to figure out why I was going up to Belfast. And then he said to me, he said, "You're not going up there to try to convert them, are you?" And it kind of blew my mind. It kind of, disoriented me for a moment because here I was, this white dude, this white officer, he's telling me about not converting some other white people because they got a beef, and I somehow get to be on his side of this struggle. You know, how I get to be now on his side against some other white people. And again, it just shows the diversity of the human family. Um, so I pondered that a long time and talked about it often, that I was suddenly now a part of an English white people going up, or who despised, at least from his language, some other white people in another part of the world. It's crazy.
Yeah, Reverend, that very point almost really sets up one question I did want to ask you, because you were coming from a place where the power dynamic of black versus white was on skin color, right? Phenotype, one having more melanin in their skin than the other group, right? And the power of white over black. And you were going into a situation where phenotypically the people looked the same, but the power equation there was on religion. And as someone who is a man of the clergy, have you any reflections on how those, like, was the tension between the two groups familiar to you? Was there a universality of that kind of oppressor oppressed kind of dynamic that you were familiar with, or did it feel different because it was playing out in a different way? Reverend, do you have any reflections on that?
Yes, but I'd like to say this. too, I think it adds into the picture. While in the GDR, German Democratic Republic, I visited the concentration camps, one of the first at Sachsenhausen, and then went up to northern Germany, Schwerin, where Hitler had planned to march Jews up into the sea. So I had that experience of actually seeing the ovens. And this, I was told, was the minor concentration camps. This was not in any way as Auschwitz and others camps. And therefore, I'm absorbing the inhumanity of humans to humans. And for the Nazis, all kinds of colors were lumped in, and it was not just Jews. They had the different nationalities marked, and the numbers of those nationalities that were killed in the concentration camp. Now I'm leaving that experience, and now I come to the airport and had the experience of which I've just spoken. Again, it's some white people, killing, destroying, hating white people. So it deepened, I think, broadened, I think, my original belief that the struggle for freedom and the struggle for human decency, human justice, was not a black-white struggle. That there were deeper issues that was at the bottom, and it may take the symptomatic form manifestation of color, or maybe some other surface visible manifestation. But there was a deeper struggle than color in the human family, and maybe you would come to. I read a little bit of Marxism, and of course there the issue is put in economic terms. So it broadened and deepened my understanding and commitment that we have to fight injustice everywhere. We have to be for freedom everywhere. And you couldn't isolate your struggle to just one segment based upon pigmentation of the world.
Essentially, it's about power ultimately, right? It doesn't matter what it does matter, of course, but the power dynamic plays out in different ways in terms of religion or race or caste in the Indian context, right? There's so many different ways. When you visited Northern Ireland, Reverend, it was at one of the high points. I say that in a negative sense in terms of relations there and the conflict there, and the active conflict would continue there until 1998 with the Good Friday Agreement. I am wondering, after your trip there, did you, for example, if, I don't know if you read the New York Times or if you watch PBS or whatever, if you saw a mention of Ireland or something going on in Belfast or something, did that trip make you more interested in engaging with what was going on there over time? Or did it, because you've been a busy man since, did it fall off the radar for you?
No, it continued, the interest and involvement, because we continued our coalition. And the interest is even now. I'm still interested, not at the point I was then, as it is true. Maybe in most of the involvements that I've had across the world, After all, I'm 90 now, I mean, you get to be 90, well, it's so that, and then you have the virus. But yeah, for years, as we continued on into the struggle, because South Africa wasn't free until the 90s. And so the struggle couldn't, as they said in Southern Africa, the struggle continues. So, and I guess I did a lot of speaking afterward, and I guess the Irish community that was open was glad to hear what I had to say, and therefore would invite me to various functions where I could make the statement born of my own personal experience. It's one thing to have a book that you read about, but to speak from personal experience of what I experienced, what I saw with my own eyes, had is sort of a persuasive touch to it.
Reverend, can I ask you, I know I'm taking up a lot of your time, and I hope it's okay if you could indulge me a little bit, but on that point, there's the famous example of Malcolm X going to Mecca and seeing the blue-eyed Muslims, I think, is that the right description, and things like that. In your case, in terms of, as you mentioned, going to Belfast and the uncomfortable experience of maybe staying with this modest family and what that meant, but actually having the lived experience in doing that and seeing up close and personal how these things were playing out on the ground. Did you have opportunities, I imagine from your pulpit, but did you have interactions with, say, African Americans, people from quote unquote your community, in terms of sharing that experience, or I suppose changing people's minds a little bit, in terms of, as much as white people can be the perpetrators of stereotypes about Black people of African descent, that it's sometimes done in the opposite direction too. Did you have opportunities ever to use that Irish example in that way?
Yes. It became a part of my life. It became a part of the teaching. That's why I think I recorded it in the book, Blacks and Jews in Crown Heights. I wanted, because it validated, if a repetition I may be, but it validated what I always believed about the world and about the struggle. And quite frankly, we had internal differences, that is, within our own struggle in the USA, and understandably so. I grew up in the South, my earliest years, as I said, in the South. And if your thinking is shaped by your experiences as a person of African ancestry in the South, and you never get beyond that, then your concept of whites or Euro-ethnics can be terribly, terribly provincial or narrow. But having traveled, been blessed to have traveled to some of the suffering points, struggle points of the world, and having been in the midst of it. I mean, I've been in the fields of revolutionaries, hiding in the fields, in the mountains. I've sat down with changed persons who had fought for their rights. So I was glad to be able to say, listen, I've been to Belfast, and this is the way I was treated. And so I think that we changed a lot of minds. I want to believe that we changed a lot of minds, and I think we caused a lot of people to think, to at least explore further that it's not just a Black-white issue. Malcolm, who was growing, as you pointed out, after his trip to Mecca, began to have some different views and he said, broaden his thinking. But before that, his thinking was broken down into black, white. You know, the problem with the world is just white people. And all we need to do as African people is get together and we'll be fine, but be sure to watch the white folks. But again, his travels broadened his thinking. And that's why I said that if I had the money, I'd put people on buses, planes, whatever, tell them to get out of their neighborhoods. When my children, I'm blessed, my family is blessed to all of our children with the colleges when they were going to school. When they got ready to go to college, I instructed them, well, all their lives, I instructed them and put them in places in our church that was open to all kinds of people, even Muslims in times of prayer would seek out a place to pray, which we found. And my daughter, by the way, remembered that when she was CEO in 2008, she held the first interfaith ceremony of the Democratic conventions, right? So, so in our travels, our minds are broadened. We come to learn more about people. So when they got ready to go to college, I said, now listen, you don't have to go to black colleges. You pick the best colleges in the country. Never mind how you get the money, I'll find the money. But you pick the colleges that presidents went to. You pick the colleges. I don't care if they polka dot, where I don't care if they're top of Mount Kilimanjaro. And then when they would do these student travels, I said, now listen, you don't need to go to Africa. We're gonna go to Africa as family. I teach African history. You enmeshed in Africa. Each one of you choose different countries. So my eldest daughter, Leah, the Reverend, chose France. She did her student training in France. Another daughter who heads up one of our organizations, Sharon, they both went to Dartmouth, and Sharon did her travels in Spain. And then a son, I got one son, he did his travels. He's a lawyer. He went to University of Chicago. He did his travels in Italy. So when we get together as a family now, we can share the experiences of the world. And therefore they have a broad concept of the world. And therefore their friends and relationships are mixed. You know, my baby daughter who went to Syracuse did not do the student travel. I think she was scheduled for that Lockerbie trip that was crashed. I think that her class was, I think now her class was there. My point is that it's almost impossible, it seemed to me, to be bigoted, to be anti anybody, any ideology, religion, if you travel significant parts of the world. The exposure will explode most myths that you may have, most erroneous concepts of the world and the struggles of the world.
Reverend, may I take this opportunity to ask you, you referenced your age, your great age of 90 years, and would you be comfortable sharing with me and with people watching how, in the totality of your activism, in terms of the international engagement that you have, brought to what you've done as an activist and as a man of the church, the last year, and in particular since the horrendous death of George Floyd, has put the issue of systemic racism, the Black Lives Matter movement on an international setting that I think few of us could have anticipated prior. You know, you don't necessarily need to get into specifics, but as someone who's been at this for a long time, how have you digested the last 9 or 10 months in the totality of your activity?
Good question. And I'm still trying to process my thinking about how to think about what is happening. It has such striking similarities to our struggles in the 70s, 80s, and 60s, the mass struggles. You know, some people have given me credit for being the mass organizer that Dr. King was in the South. I was sort of the key, the point person in North in mass action. So much of it reminded me of our struggles. I tell you the truth, and I did not like the term Black Lives Matter, right? I thought that we had settled that question and that we did not need to announce to the world our matter. I mean, that's a given, right? It's almost like begging, you know, don't you know I matter? But if you have reached a point where you have affirmed this within yourself, what the world thinks now, you force upon the world the definition of yourself. And if your definition of yourself is that I am somebody, I'm equal to anybody, then you don't need to worry about announcing it to the world. It's almost like we used to wear a shirt that says I'm a man. Harriet Tubman used to say, he had a poem, Ain't I a Woman? Well, you at a stage of development that you still feel the need to announce to somebody, to the world, you know, please accept me. I'm like you. So I thought we were on the other side of that, but of course I was wrong, which is not unusual. That Black Lives seem to have been the slogan that captured the moment. Well, a lot of the actions were our actions, mass action, mass movement, and the responses were not unlike the responses that we received. After the upheavals of the 60s, President Johnson, the President's Commission on Racial Disorder, the Cunningham Commission it's called, laid out the fact that all of the upheavals, all of the riots as they were called, were precipitated by a police action, right? This was 1967, and then laid out a list of recommendations. I have in my office and put in my book, again, this particular book, recommendations that we had made to police commissioners. When in 1978, when Mayor Koch became mayor of New York, the first group we met was our group, which was come together around the killing of Randy Evans, 15-year-old kid shot in the head in 1976. And we had shut down New York, a call for shutdown in New York. So when he became the mayor, our group was the first group. And I brought up to him that the police question was going to haunt him throughout his administration and was going to haunt America, and submitted a list of recommendations. So these recommendations that we had submitted, it isn't more what can we do, but it is do what is already out there, already on paper, and does America have the will to put into place the recommendations that are already out there. One of the recommendations, I must say, which came out of the 60s, out of the Black Power movement, which was Black theology. And it's been through the same thing. Euro-Americans, white Americans, what can we do? What can we do? And one of the responses we developed was, well, get Black. That's what you can do. Become Black. Well, we didn't mean it pigmentation, of course, but we meant it as an ontological symbol. That is to say, get into the feelings of person, Black people, people of African ancestry. Be empathetic. You get into our feelings and you will know what to do. It's the ancient saying, the ancient golden rule: do unto others as you would have others do to you. So if you can feel what a person feel, what a family feel, who has to instruct their children. If you see the police coming, here's a list of questions you ask. This is how you behave. Stay away from them. Don't get close to them. Don't make any move at all. If you're in a car, don't put your hand on the compartment. If you know how it feels to know that your son, your wife, may be killed by the very people that you're paying to protect. I could sit here the rest of the time and tell you the number of people the police have killed, and I can name you the dates they were killed. That was our main issue. So that's why I go back to the Irish question. And on and on. If you can empathize with that, if you can feel with that, as I can feel with the untouchable in India, I can feel with Native American, I can feel with oppressed people around the world. I feel them. I feel what they feel. I can feel the humiliation. I can feel that. And as a result of my feeling that, I want to do something about it. So maybe we were on to something to say to people who want seriously to make a change. What can they do? Well, be Black. That's what you can do. Get into the Black experience. Try to be empathetic. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I hope that that the movement will not be diverted. Power, I think, as you pointed out earlier, Frederick Douglass said it, concedes nothing without it a man. People don't just give up power and privilege, prestige. They are going to maneuver. They are going to use every scheme in order to sustain themselves in power. And hopefully these, especially young people who are out front, and God bless them, commend them to the highest, will understand that and appreciate that they are not going to be welcomed with open arms and blazing bands into the halls of power. Somebody has said, you don't put on your Sunday suit and go to a revolution. You're right. Power is, the change of power is a gritty, grimy business. So I hope that they appreciate that, and I hope that they make the demands have very clear demands that are being made that are doable. I hope that they're clear about that. And I hope that they will not be divided in the struggle. Those were some of the things that we experienced. The other thing I would hope that in the 60s, we went through a cultural revolution, which was necessary. While I've just mentioned my cosmopolitan perception of the world, at the same time, people who have been enslaved, who have been oppressed, have to come to accept themselves. The oppressors, the enslavers, will have done everything possible to deny the oppressed, the enslaved, their personhood. So if a people is going to be free, even politically free, they should never stop searching their history for who they are, So through the 60s, it was the cultural revolution, Black Power. It was relating to Africa as our home, as a magnificent continent. And there was a change of names and a change of hairstyles and all those things that we've been taught to hate ourselves. We concentrated on that phase of the revolution, not the political revolution. That was a mistake I think we made. We didn't use the energy that was deep and pervasive now with respect to culture, but maybe it might have been too much, but we didn't use that energy, at least some of it, in transforming the political scene. And therefore, Black Power did eventuate into helping to fuel liberation struggles in other parts of the world. My point is, I hope this time we gain the revolution, the change will take place as it relates to political and economic power, but then we don't have the cultural revolution and we lose who in fact we are and become so integrated that we become simply a change of things as they are, only different people, different colors. I guess does that make sense to you?
No, it does, Reverend. I guess, I mean, because your career has spanned, am I right in thinking that one of the key differences, I know that there were white people involved in some of the activism in the 60s, but from what I can see, that the buy-in of white Americans and people who are not of African descent themselves in the United States and beyond, saying, hold on, enough is enough, no more, the weight of that buy-in of white people as well, I hope will make a difference to 50 years ago. I don't know what you think about that, though.
Yeah, I hope so. It seems better now. We have the past experience. The civil rights movement got us started in change, right? But again, the culture, there was maybe the social movement. Civil rights was more social, legal movement. I mean, we were trying to just get on the front of the bus, so to speak, because at that time, and now the South of my youth, I mean, you got on the bus, you paid your money on the bus, then you got off the bus and you went to the back of the bus where there was a line and you could sit there until a white person wanted your seat. And so my grandmother would have to sit. And so if a little white kid come along and his father said, get up, auntie, let my son have your seat, she was bound by law to get up. And so when Dr. King initiated the Montgomery Bus Boycott in 1955, the demands were very minuscule. It was, we want to sit in the front of the bus, looking back. It was a big thing then. He eventually set in motion the movement, which is very interesting always because the minutest incident can set in motion the most momentous movements. And so in the civil rights movement through the 60s, but we became a bit disillusioned. It wasn't moving fast enough. And so into Black Power in 1966 with Kwame, Black Power, which was a cry for speed up change, but more importantly, the demand that we look within ourselves. that he that would be free must strike the first blow. So the need for a cultural revolution. We were taught to hate ourselves, to hate our color, to hate our hair, to hate the way we look, to hate where we came from. And by the way, what I'm thinking about, isn't it interesting? Note this, that when they introduce Kamala Harris as vice president, they say she's a mix. She is East Indian, and she's Black. Well, where's Black country? I don't know any country that on earth that's Black. You know, how does she get to the East Indian? We know that's a country, that's a place. But Black, that's a color. That's where did that start? How do you identify people by color? Who started identifying by color? The point is that they just can't relate to Africa. She is of African ancestry. You did it at the beginning of the program. But generally, American can't, even Blacks can't identify with Africa because we've been taught that it's the place of jungles and savages and whatever. So we had to go through a period of culture where we could reclaim our past and realize that the land from which we've come was a magnificent contributors of civilization, much of which Europe stole, distorted, and we had to go through that through the 60s, and which eventuated into a change. It was, well, I guess it's the zeitgeist, it's the spirit of the times. So after the Cultural Revolution, then we found ourselves still struggling for political power. And even Dr. King had come to say that what we need is a radical redistribution of political and economic power. So now maybe it's an emergence of our cultural lessons, and all of us, white, Black, all of us have learned from the past. We got we got young people involved, and maybe this is, we got a good man as a president. I do believe he's a man of empathy. I think that he in other words, he's been able to be Black. His suffering has made him Black, you know. So maybe the convergence of what we have learned in the past, our suffering of the past. Floyd, that man, that policeman with his knee on his neck, anybody human can identify with that and not forget that. So all of these factors converging may give us a point in history, maybe our last time, to seize the moment and to come together and realize that either we're going to live as brothers and sisters or die as fools. I think Dr. King said something like that. But in America, we still got a lot of work to do as we're going through this period in American history.
Reverend, I know I'm really taking up a lot of your time, more than I promised you I would.
I got plenty to tell you. I don't want to take your time.
No, I promise this is my last question. Did you know Reverend Martin Luther King? And if you did or if you didn't, would you speculate on how he would view today and what's happened?
All right. I did. I only knew him from a distance, not close. We met on certain issues. I was executive vice chair of Operation Breadbasket in New York. Operation Breadbasket was the economic arm of SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which he founded and was the president. And this was, see, it's a good question because this folds into what I mean. After Dr. King saw that we had made advances in social mobility, you know, we can sit in the front of the bus now, you know, big deal. But we didn't have any money to get on the bus, you know, obviously exaggerated term. So he began to try to think of ways that he could bring some economic change to America. And so he conceived of Operation Breadbasket, that as clergy, we would meet with the presidents of corporations and try to get them to respond substantially to the Black communities. So I was involved in Operation Bread and on the war question, Vietnam War. In fact, I was at Riverside Church when he made that, why I opposed the war in 1967, April of 1967. I believe if he were here today, he would be the same who he was then. That is, he would be calling for the oneness of the human family. He would be emphasizing love, togetherness, but at the same time, he would not bite his tongue in pointing up the disparities, the racism, the hatred that yet exists. And he would surely lift up the impoverishment of so many. In America today, I'm told 1 in 7 persons don't know if they don't have enough food to eat. Can you imagine 1 in 7 persons? 1 in 5 Latino, African American don't have enough food to eat in America today. So he would surely point up the disparities economically, the food question, the medical services, all of the ills that we witness today. But he was also a man of hope. I guess that is in our DNA. We are people of hope. Our music speaks to hope. I've been hearing of a city called Heaven. I'm trying to make it my home. And he used to say, you know, we sing a song, is the balm in Gilead, you know, from the biblical text that the prophet raised the question, Jeremiah raised the question during Israel's devastation by foreign nations. That is their balm in Gilead. And Dr. King used to say that our people laboring in the hot tobacco fields of Virginia, cotton patches of Georgia, with the slave master's whip on their backs. They turned Jeremiah's question, is there balm in Gilead? And they hammered the question mark out into an exclamation point. And they saying, there is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. There is a balm in Gilead. So hope have been with us. I guess that's what has kept us going. And even what is happening in the Capitol, you know, that's a part of our history. The attempt to overthrow the election, the vote, particularly where people of African ancestry is concerned. After the Civil War, 1865, we thought that America was open, gates of freedom was open. We were ready to move over to Congress. In 1867, passed legislation. Southern states should have conventions, and all male should be included in that. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment to the Constitution had been passed, ending slavery, giving the right to vote. At that time, we had 16 persons in the Congress. We had 2 senators from Mississippi, and guess what? All that was rolled back. And in 1870, in Mississippi, they overturned the election of Blanche Bruce, Harlem Rebels, who was a Black senator that had been elected. The white Democrats overturned that election and ran us out of the Congress, so that in 10 years later, 1876, with the election of Rutherford B. Hayes, all that had been wiped out. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing new about what is happening today. The history of America has been deny people of African ancestry participation in the electoral process, particularly the vote. And so today, what we witness is a replay of history. But at the same time, we're hopeful, that crisis gives us an opportunity for creative struggle. And the words of words of uh, Luda Continuity in Mozambique and Angola, the struggle continues.
Reverend, I'd like to mention your book. I think you've a copy of it there. It's called No Monopoly on Suffering,
Yes.
Blacks and Jews in Crown Heights and Elsewhere. There's a foreword by Cornell West, and I just want to make sure that I say the name of it there in case people, I think it's available actually from the website of the House of the Lord Church.
Yeah.
If people are interested in reading about Reverend Daughtry's engagement in that regard, a topical issue in terms of the relations between people of African descent and Jewish New Yorkers, but I think you touch on other groups as well. So I think in terms of our topic today, it's definitely worth mentioning. Reverend, it's such, I thank you for your generosity of time. We've run over. Thank you for sharing your reflections on your time in Ireland and your work over many, many, many decades. It's really a point of personal privilege for me to be here with you today and for you to come to us by the wonders of Zoom into people's living rooms and onto people's phones. Thank you so much, Reverend. I sincerely mean it. I'm very, very grateful for this.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful for the opportunity that you've given this old man to remember. When you reach my age, you want to do a lot of talking because you don't have too many more years to talk. So as I tell people, I say, listen, I don't sleep much. You can call me anytime, 24 hours anytime. And I'm 3 a.m. in the morning, my eyes pop open. Yeah. I know. I'm glad you have awakened me because in a little while I'll be sleeping a long time.
Well, Reverend, I'm trying to figure out. You told me the exact date of you hearing Dr. King's speech in the Riverside Church. I imagine when I'm 90, maybe I would remember something as specific as that, but I'm impressed at your recall, I have to say. That's it for today's Black, Brown and Green Voices event, and what an immense way to do an homage to Black History Month. I've been saying it a lot in the last 2 years. We have Black History Month in February and we have March where everything turns green and St. Patrick's Day, but we haven't had a lot of interconnectedness between those two important parts of American history, and the diasporas of these groups are very intricate. They collaborated, they cooperated. There's been a lot of conflict, but I believe very strongly in the power of giving voice and discussion and learning from our past. And my goodness, what a wonderful way to do that today with Reverend Daughtry, to hear his from his breadth of experience and knowledge is a real treat for me, and I think all of you watching will agree. We will be back later in the semester when I interview Professor Danielle Phillips Cunningham from Texas Women's University. She has recently published a book called Putting Their Hands on Race, Irish Immigrant and Southern Black Domestic Workers. So that will be interesting as well in a different way. But again, Reverend Daughtry, thank you so, so much.
Thank you. As I said, thank you for inviting me. And anytime, Dr. Miriam, you have demonstrated a sensitivity and a grasp of history, and I'm a student, and I've learned from you. Thank you.
That is a real privilege to hear you say that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.